When the humans entered the galactic war, Zorak and Nasat blood began flowing across the stars in torrents, as mankind's suicidal ferocity and reckless tactics decimated the once unassailable alien fleets in mere hours. "Please, High Commander Hector, we're dying by the millions as the Zorak bombard our colonies into ash. You Nasat are our only hope," begged Samuel Ramos, humanity's ambassador. He clenched his fists, voice hoarse from arguing. Hector sneered, his scaled lips curling. "Your feeble species should have surrendered cycles ago. The Zorak will subjugate your pitiful alliance within a rotation. This war is not our concern." The Nasat commander stood, looming over Samuel. "Although," a wicked glint shone in his yellow eyes, "I might consider aiding you mammals if you can defeat Azok, our greatest warrior, in single combat, in our gravity." Hector's tail swished. "An impossible feat for your kind." Samuel gritted his teeth. Dueling an 8-foot-tall, half-ton scaled monstrosity built for Hygie. Suicide, but for humanity, he had to try. "I accept your challenge," Samuel said. "When I win, you will join us against the Zorak." He prayed mankind could hold out long enough for him to send a fleet. If not, 1 trillion humans would perish. The Nasat scoffed cruelly. "You will lose, primate, but I appreciate the coming entertainment." He clicked a button, summoning his aide. "Escort the human to the battle pit. Perhaps the Zorak will reward us for returning his corpse." The next day, Samuel found himself standing across from Kronak in a caged fighting pit. Thousands of Nasat spectators packed the arena, their raucous cheers echoing off the metal walls. Kronak towered over Samuel, his green scales glistening under the harsh spotlights. The Nasat champion was built like a tank, all bulging muscles and armored plates. As they began circling each other, Samuel felt like he was moving through molasses. Each step was a Herculean effort in the Nasat's punishing gravity. Meanwhile, Kronak moved with the agility of a viper, his forked tongue flicking out to taste Samuel's fear. Kronak struck first, his fist hammering into Samuel's ribs like a wrecking ball. Samuel staggered back, wheezing. He swung a counterpunch that bounced harmlessly off Kronak's scales. The Nasat warrior laughed, a grating hiss. "Is that the best you can do, mammal?" They traded blows, Samuel growing more fatigued with each swing while Kronak seemed to only get stronger. Sweat and blood splattered the arena floor as Kronak pummeled Samuel. Vision blurring from exhaustion, Samuel looked up to where Hector sat watching in his private box. The Nasat commander's face was twisted in a sneer of cruel amusement. Rage ignited in Samuel's heart, and a red mist descended over his vision. With a primal roar, Samuel launched himself at Kronak, tackling him around the waist. Kronak snarled in surprise as they crashed to the ground. Samuel scrambled onto the Nasat's back, locking his arms around Kronak's thick neck in a chokehold. Bellowing in fury, Kronak surged to his feet and slammed Samuel against the cage. Metal bars crumpled and bent from the impact. Again and again, Kronak smashed Samuel against the walls, trying to dislodge him. But Samuel only tightened his grip, biceps bulging with strain. Kronak's struggles weakened and his knees began to buckle. The Nasat clawed at Samuel's arms, drawing blood, but Samuel refused to let go even as his vision dimmed. With a final rasping snarl, Kronak toppled forward and crashed face first to the ground, unconscious. Samuel rolled off Kronak's back and staggered to his feet, his legs trembling. The arena had fallen utterly silent, the Nasat spectators staring in shocked disbelief. Samuel raised a bloody fist in defiance. Suddenly Samuel was grabbed and yanked off his feet by a pair of Nasat guards. They dragged Samuel, kicking and yelling, to the base of Hector's viewing box. Hector glared down at Samuel, scales flushed dark with rage. "You made me look like a fool," Hector roared. "I should gut you where you stand." "I beat your champion," Samuel spat. "Fair and square, you gave your word. Honor our deal." Hector narrowed his eyes. "I said you had to defeat Kronak. I never said anything about letting you leave this arena alive." On Hector's signal, a dozen Nasat soldiers took up positions along the arena walls. They leveled plasma rifles at Samuel. the whine of charging capacitors filling the air. Samuel raised his chin and locked eyes with Hector, unflinching even as the blood from his wounds dripped to the ground. Hector's finger tightened on the trigger. Samuel tensed, ready to leap at the treacherous Nasat commander barehanded, determined to rip out his throat before the plasma bolts tore him apart. Suddenly, a streak of blue plasma seared through the air from above, striking one of the soldiers in the chest. The Nasat's corpse tumbled from the arena wall and crumpled on the ground. Hector whirled, scales flaring in shock. What treachery is this? A deep thrum filled the arena as a sleek gunship shimmered into view overhead, disengaging its cloaking field. Armored figures fast roped down into the arena, plasma rifles blazing. Nasat soldiers fell left and right, screeching as the human commandos' precision shots found weak points in their scaly hides. One of the humans hit the ground in front of Samuel, yanking off his helmet. A grizzled, scarred face grinned at the stunned ambassador. "Samuel Ramos? Captain Jack Thorne, Terran Special Tactics and Recon. Heard you could use a lift." Samuel's exhausted face split into a fierce grin as Jack tossed him a plasma rifle. "Impeccable timing, Captain." The two laid down covering fire, bright bolts flashboiling Nasat flesh, as the rest of the human strike team pushed towards them. Soldiers streamed in through the smashed gates at ground level, quickly seizing control. In the chaos, Hector tried to slip away unseen, but Samuel spotted the cowardly Nasat commander and put a plasma bolt through the back of his skull. Hector dropped without a sound, his body sprawling on the arena floor. "Ambassador secure, all units, evac now," Jack barked into his comm. The Terran commandos fell back in good order, keeping the snarling Nasat forces at bay with disciplined fire and tight formations. Samuel found himself bundled into a dropship, which lifted off with a roar of engines and rocketed into the sky. "Fine bit of soldiering there, Captain," Samuel said, slumping back in his acceleration chair aboard the strike team's stealthed corvette. "But how the hell did you slip a squad of gunships past the Nasat defense grid?" Jack flashed a crooked smile. "Experimental cloaking tech. Reverse-engineered it from Zorak ship wreckage. Figured this was as good a time as any to give it a field test." Samuel shook his head, chuckling despite his wounds and fatigue. The Terran alliance kept pulling out surprises, snatching victories from the jaws of defeat again and again. His smile faded as he considered the repercussions. The Nasat would be out for blood after such a brazen assault on their sovereignty. This was only the beginning. On the planet below, the Nasat High Command was in an uproar. "The humans dare strike at us? In the heart of our own empire?" High Counselor Zash snarled, slamming a fist on the table. "Hector was a fool to let things get this far." "They must pay for this outrage," another counselor growled. "Our response must be swift and merciless. Crush the upstart apes now before their impudence spreads." Zash raised a clawed hand. "Agreed. Summon the battle fleets. We end this here." The Nasat ships assembled in orbit, their hulls bristling with weaponry. The Terran colony of New Jakarta would burn for this insult. But as the Nasat warships transitioned out of hyperspace, they found themselves facing not a meager defensive picket, but a full Terran battle fleet. And to the Nasat commander's shock, the human ships were now equipped with advanced weaponry and shielding that put them on par with Nasat vessels. The human admiral broadcast an ultimatum. "Nasat forces, this is Admiral Ava Prescott of the Terran Alliance 3rd Fleet. You are hereby notified that a state of war exists between our peoples following the Nasat Imperium's criminal attempt to murder our ambassador. Any Nasat ships that do not immediately surrender will be fired upon. This is your only warning." The Nasat commander snarled a curse and ordered his ships to attack. The battle was joined, plasma and missiles crisscrossing the void. Nasat ships boiled and burst under the Terran guns. Even as New Jakarta's orbital space blazed with fire, another Terran fleet dropped out of warp in the skies above Xyloth, the Nasat throne world. Alarms blared across the planet as human warships began a devastating orbital bombardment, hammering military bases and industrial centers. The fires of war raged across Nasat space as the full might of the Terran Alliance rose to crush its foes. The Nasat had dismissed the humans as weak. Now they faced a reckoning at humanity's hands. In the chaotic aftermath of the Nasat surrender, Samuel found himself swarmed by ecstatic Terran soldiers, their faces alight with relief and joy. They clapped him on the back, shook his hand vigorously, and shouted his name to the heavens. "Samuel Ramos, the hero of the Terran Alliance," they cheered, their voices echoing through the ruined streets of the Nasat capital. Samuel, battered and bruised, could only grin weakly in response. The weight of what he had accomplished was just beginning to sink in. Against all odds, he had brought the mighty Nasat Imperium to its knees. But there was little time to savor the victory. Mere hours after the Nasat capitulation, alarm klaxons blared across the Terran fleet. Sensor arrays lit up as a massive Zorak armada, drawn by the Nasat distress calls, dropped out of hyperspace on the edges of the system. Samuel, still aboard the flagship, felt his blood run cold as the tactical displays showed the sheer size of the enemy force. Hundreds of Zorak warships, each bristling with weapons, bore down on the battered Terran fleet. "All hands to battle stations!" Samuel roared into the comm, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. "Prepare for incoming fire!" The Zorak wasted no time, opening up with a blistering salvo of plasma torpedoes and particle beams. The void lit up with deadly fire as the Terran ships scrambled to evade and return fire. Explosions blossomed across the hulls of human vessels as the Zorak scored hit after hit. Samuel gripped the command console, his knuckles white as the flagship shuddered under the onslaught. Damage reports flooded in, each more dire than the last. "We can't take much more of this, Ambassador," the captain shouted over the blaring alarms. Samuel knew he was right. The Terran fleet, exhausted from the battle with the Nasat, was outgunned and outnumbered. They couldn't win a prolonged slugging match against the Zorak. But maybe they didn't have to. As Samuel stared at the tactical display, a desperate plan began to form. It was a gamble, but it was their only chance. "Concentrate all fire on the Zorak flagship's engines," Samuel ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We're going to cripple that bastard." The Terran gunners obeyed, pouring a relentless stream of plasma into the massive Zorak dreadnought's rear. For a moment it seemed futile, the flagship's shields easily absorbing the barrage. But then, with a brilliant flare, the engine section exploded, sending the Zorak ship careening out of control. A ragged cheer went up from the human crew, but Samuel wasn't done. "Now, link all our reactors and prepare to overload them on my mark. We're going to give the Zorak a send-off they won't forget." The Terran captains, to their credit, didn't hesitate. They knew what Samuel was proposing, turning their own ships into a makeshift doomsday weapon. It was suicide, but it would save countless human lives. As the reactors strained to their limits, the Zorak commander, seeing the danger, desperately tried to rally his ships into a retreat, but it was too late. "Fire!" Samuel said, his voice calm and clear. A lance of blinding energy erupted from the Terran fleet, spearing through the heart of the Zorak formation. Zorak ships vanished in the blink of an eye, vaporized instantly by the unimaginable power of the blast. Over half the enemy fleet was annihilated in a single stroke, the rest left crippled and adrift. But the Terran ships, pushed far beyond their limits, were also consumed in the apocalyptic blast. Bulkheads buckled, hulls split open, and reactors went critical as the fleet tore itself apart. On the bridge of the flagship, Samuel closed his eyes as the white light of oblivion filled the view screen. He had done his duty. The Terran Alliance would survive. That was all that mattered. In that last instant, as the nuclear fires consumed him, Samuel felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. Humanity had joined the war and ended it within hours. The galaxy would never be the same. If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.